Bleh. The Guyver, directed by Steve Wang, who I've never heard of, and someone who I've heard of and greatly admire, Screamin' Mad George. So this is as far as I know, this is the only movie that Screamin' Mad George ever directed in any kind of capacity. The Guyver's pedigree is incredible. It's got Screamin' Mad George special effects. It's got direction by Screamin' Mad George, who's from the punk band The Mad, from the late 70s punk scene back in the day. He used to play like Max's Kansas City, did all sorts of crazy, we've talked about it on the channel, does crazy special effects on stage, like really gory, really interesting singles. They put out Fried Egg, The Eyeball, I Hate Music, good stuff. And then eventually he went to SVA, got into special effects. He did all the special effects on all the Brian Usna films, whether he was directing them or producing them. So this is actually produced. The Guyver is produced by Brian Usna, who is one of my favorite filmmakers ever. He's kind of like, Brian Usna is kind of like a Roger Corman for the 80s in a way. That's the best way to sort of think about him. And the only crime, he's made many movies, and the only crime is that he has not continued. He sort of stopped around the year 2000 is when he kind of really stopped making movies like that. That was really around the turn of the millennium is when he really slowed down after he was so prolific in the 90s, and he jumpstarted his career with Reanimator. And so in 1991, he directed, I believe this was co-financed by Japanese money. The Guyver is a manga character and an anime character from Japanese media. And it's kind of like, one of those, what do they call them? Super Sensei, something, whatever, like the Power Rangers, you know what I mean? Like the Power Rangers are actually some other Japanese show that got repackaged as the Power Rangers. And that they're basically, before the Power Rangers became successful later in the 90s, you had like the Guyver is this weird sort of like sci-fi horror, superhero. They're trying to do the superhero thing. It's, they even make a reference to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in the movie, in the script. And you could tell that they're trying to chase the popularity of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And later they the Guyver didn't land, but with American audiences, but the Power Rangers most certainly did. I wouldn't say that. Yeah, I guess the Power Rangers kind of fit in with, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And then they had other variations of that. There was the Superhuman Samurais. I don't know, the Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad. There were the Beetleborgs, and there was like Beverly Hills Tattooed Titan Teenagers or something, like a lot of really weird, like crime fighting superhero ensemble shows featuring teens. In the same way that 20 somethings were enamored by like Seinfeld and Friends, like 90s kids were enamored by these shows. And so like the Guyver is like one of those like failed launches. And, I'd heard about the Guyver for years, and you always see Mark Hamill on the poster, like dividing his face. It's like, oh, Mark Hamill is the Guyver. That is not the case. Mark Hamill is in the movie. So you have Mark Hamill, you have Brian Usna, you have Scream Mad George, you have crazy creature special effects from Scream Mad George. It's like all these things on paper sound really great. Then to top it off, you have David freaking Gale, the guy who played Dr. Carl Hill in Reanimator. If you're a horror fan, you are very familiar with David Gale's role in the two original Reanimator films, which actually comprised the original book, by the way, the original short story by H.P. Lovecraft. Both movies borrow from that book. And you also have a little bit cameo by Jeffrey Combs, and he plays a scientist called Dr. East instead of Dr. West, which is just perfect, right? And at that time, he had already wrapped both Reanimator films, and until Beyond Reanimator 10 years later, we would not get another one. So what's the synopsis here is FBI agent Max Reed witnesses Dr. Tetsu Segawa, a researcher for the mysterious Chronos Corporation, being murdered. Dr. Segawa had stolen an alien device known as the Guyver from Chronos. College student Sean Barker, whose girlfriend's, and he's also he does martial arts, Sean Baker, and he doesn't look like a college student at all. This was like 90s aged kids were like, looked like they were 35, right? So you grew up being like, why do I look so young? And why does everybody that's in high school look like they're 35? And that's because they would cast 35-year-olds, right? In any case, Sean Barker finds the Guyver's hiding spot, which was, switched inside of a lunchbox at the beginning, while watching the forensic team investigate the crime scene. That's really just like kind of the setup. I don't even know how to describe what the Guyver is. It's a weird world. Like there are people, like human beings are like a weapon that were created. All human beings were a weapon that was created by aliens. We don't know these aliens. We don't ever see these aliens, but some of these people happen to be aliens themselves, or the next step of human evolution in the fact that they can transform into aliens. And it's very like common in this society. None of this is explained properly, despite the fact that we get like a 5-minute, like Star Wars slow crawl to explain all this stuff, but none of this stuff is actually explained because you're watching them and you're like, nothing was conveyed. Like it just didn't, like I had no idea what the fuck was going on. It's funny. You always hear like the Guyver has, because I guess of the show, and it like has like a core audience. So people are kind of like, oh yeah, in the Guyver movie. But for me, it's always been in my periphery. Like I've always like kind of heard about the Guyver. And then my dude, Stephen Biro, who puts out a lot of stuff that I detest. Every once in a while, he puts out something on Unearthed Films where I'm like, dude, I've never seen that before. Let me check it out. He did it. I had him a long time ago. I had him on a thing, and we talked about Rock and Rule. He had Rock and Rule. He put out Rock and Rule, and I'm so grateful for Steven to have done that, because Rock and Rule was like lost media until he was able to license it. That was a legendary release 20 years ago. Found in the back of a magazine. I was like, I have to buy this. I ordered it, I think, online. I was like, where did I get it? Because I don't think it was in store. Maybe it was in stores. Maybe it wasn't. I was working at Sam Goody at the time. Whatever. In any case, he just put out the Guyver. I was like, you know what? It's loaded with bonus features, and it's like a special, like it's like the definitive remastered set. I'm like, I'm just gonna blind buy this. Let me blind buy this from Unearthed. It'll be what it is. I'm just gonna enjoy it. I'm gonna watch it for 31 days of Halloween. Let me tell you something. I've never regretted a blind buy so much. I mean, Mark Hamill is so criminally misused. The guy, Sean Barker, like the Guyver isn't even in the movie. Like I couldn't tell you what happens. They're like running around looking for him, and I don't freaking know. And there's this one great, like, when like hip hop, doing like a hip hop breakdown was very fashionable in the 90s. God, the 90s were great. Doing like a hip hop breakdown in the 90s, like the thugs, they do like this weird hip hop breakdown. It's pretty funny. It's not a good movie. It does not hold up. The special effects don't even save it. Like that's the problem. And it's funny. It's at the beginning of the decade. It's one of the early examples of like weird 90s slapstick comedy that you see in a lot of kids movies that would follow suit, like Three Ninjas, and stuff like that. I recently had a thesis, like 90s movies, like kids 90s movies always were about 4 different things. You have 4 categories, main categories of kids movies in the 90s. Ready? Martial arts is one. Sports is another one. Animals is another one. And children defending something, or fighting or taking on bumbling burglars or criminals is 4. Obviously, Home Alone started that trend, but Home Alone is essentially a siege movie, right? When you think about it, the point is that you can take any one of those categories I just said, and you can blend them, and you'll find every kids movie from the 90s. Like for instance, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles covers 3 of those categories. You have animals, you have martial arts. Oh no, you have 2 of those categories: animals and martial arts. Right? There's no sports. There's no. I guess the bumbling burglars are the Foot Clan, kind of, but that's not kids, although they are teenagers. So there you go. It all works out. But you look at The Sandlot, you look at Air Bud, you look at Blank Check. Like everything fits. Three Ninjas, martial arts, little kids defending from burglars. And there is some sports. Basketball is in there, but they play a basketball game. So it's a very interesting sort of thing. And so the Guyver, and it's like a weird sort of it's like a live action slapstick comedy that you find in all these kids movies. And Guyver's tone is that it does not have the tone of a horror film. Mark Hamill is not the Guyver, despite what the poster's trying to trick you. I don't know if that was Brian Usna who did that. Somebody did that. I was like, why would you? I'm not going to blame Brian Usna for that. Love you, Brian Usna. But hey, listen, you gotta get people interested in your movie somehow. And I guess there's like a sequel that's supposed to be better. The Guyver 2 is supposed to be a better film. I don't know if it is or not, but I gave this 2 stars out of 5. I'm sorry to say. And it just was not my bag at all. So that is the Guyver.